Welcome to the ALX Show, where we talk faith, family, and all things real estate. Let's get to it. What's up, Josh? Good to see you. Today it is the third episode of the ALX Show, and I am so glad to have you on for this show because you had mentioned that you want to talk about growth. What does
Yes.
growth look like? Improvement, growth as a business, growth in real estate, growth as a husband, as a father, as a employer. There's so many aspects of growth and what that looks like and different ways that people can interpret that or different ways that it could be applied. But just broadly speaking, how do you define growth? How do you look at that? How do you measure it? Give us some broad strokes and then we can kind of dial into some of those components of how they apply to life. But yeah, I just want to hear, like, what's your overall sense when you think about, like, I'm growing as a person or I'm growing, as a business owner or something like that. What goes through your mind? How do you think through that?
It's a great question, and there's a lot to get in there. Growth to me is, there's so many different facets of growth. I think most importantly, you need to grow, um, in the way that you think, and your perspective, and your beliefs, and how you see things, how you interpret things, and then you need to grow in how you treat others.
Mm,
Those, I think, are the 2 primary places of where can we grow? We can grow in what we believe, how we think. Now, how do we do that? Uh, a lot of it's intake. What are you studying? What are you listening to? Who are you hanging out with? Um, what sources of information are coming to you? What are you digesting? Um, and typically, you can tell a lot by the direction that you're growing. Is you look at what you're watching, what you're reading, who you're listening to, who you're hanging out with. Um, but we're always going to be growth too is about change, right?
mhm.
So you can't grow without change. I mean, if you don't if you're not growing, you're standing still. Everything's the same. So are we open to change, right? Are we flexible? Do we look at um, problems and situations from like a, hey, it's my way or the highway. This is like this is my vision. I'm holding this. I got a grip around this thing. We're gonna do it. I'm only gonna do this in a way that I feel comfortable with. Well, that's not that's not being willing to change. You're certainly not going to see any growth from that.
Mhm.
That's what's going to keep us still. Uh, but talking about change, what does it require to be flexible, to be willing to change? The core there is humility. You have to, have this belief that while yes, you can be confident, but too that you don't know everything, and there's people around you probably in most situations that are going to know better than you, because that's how God created us. We all have different talents and different strengths and different purposes. So we weren't designed to do it on our own. We were designed to do it together, towards His purposes and for His glory. And when you think of it that way, then you can kind of be like, yeah, okay, I don't have to know it all. I can be just a part of the solution. I can provide value in the areas that I'm competent in, that I've got a natural skill set in. Um, but then, I can be humble in knowing that, hey, somebody else is going to come along and probably um, be maybe a better voice or have a better idea in those other areas where maybe I'm not as experienced or not as confident or it's not my God given skill set. And just be open to that, just
Mm.
and value people. That's why I said, like, goes back to change it. How do you see other people? How are you thinking, and how do you see other people? Um,
Mm.
I think those are 2 big factors. I mean, gosh, you talk about growth and it gets, I'm just sitting here thinking about it. It gets real deep. Um, but yeah, how you think and how you see others. I think that's how you measure it, right? You measure it from what did I think before? How am I growing? How am I maturing?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
look back at your experiences, how you handle things then, how you handle things now.
I love that you started there. I love that you start with, "Are you even willing to change?" So my wife
Yeah.
is a mental health therapist, and I think that's something she's learned over the years, that sometimes clients, they just don't want to change. They say they do maybe, but the kind of work that it takes to be a better person it takes a lot of work. Yeah, there's a lot of effort, and some people just don't want to do that. But we were talking with a therapist group last week, some of my wife's colleagues and all, and some of the questions that we were talking about this um, in general, but one of the therapists was like, one way to view it is to ask yourself three questions or kind of fill in the blank. Life is blank. People are blank. I am blank. And if you
Mm,
have hopeful, positive connotations with the words that you want to fill in there, then you're on your way to growth. So yeah, it kind of echoes like what you're talking about. Like just people, how you view them, how you view yourself. Are you humble? Are you willing to change? So yeah, I think it's great. It's a great start.
absolutely. I mean, and those are right at the core. Those are your beliefs, right?
Mm,
What do I believe about myself? What do I believe about other people? What do I believe about my purpose and what I'm here to do? And what do I believe about's most important? That and it, yeah, I think if we're all being honest, nobody really wants to change. There's some things in our life that need change, obviously, like
mhm,
because they're causing discomfort. So you want to get yourself out of discomfort into a comfortable place. That's the kind of change that everyone's like, yeah, we're willing to do that. The changes that are hard is when you're going from what's comfortable to what's uncomfortable, but in your heart, you believe, in your mind, you know that you need to do it. You're being called to it. That's the change that I think most people have a hard time with, myself included, because uh, that's the hard change. That requires a deep reflection and looking at yourself about, am I willing to do it? What's it going to cost me? Um, am I sure I want to do it? There's lots of things that you can get into, but that's a step when it requires sacrifice, when it requires getting uncomfortable. That's the change where I think that we're really talking about. Uh,
mm,
And, at the end of the day, are you what do you wanna do? Like, what do you wanna accomplish? If that change is gonna help you get to the person you wanna be, to the goals that you wanna accomplish, you willing to do it? That that's that's a hard question because you don't ever really know for sure. That's where faith comes in. We
mhm,
can, we can hear, we can hear, we can believe, and we can obey. Um, I think that's incredibly important to live a successful, joyful life. Um But do you have the faith, to know like, "Hey, I feel a tug. I know we need to go in this
mhm,
direction. We need to be flexible. We need to figure out how to get to this place, but in doing so, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be uncomfortable. There's gonna be some unknowns." Um, and at that point, are you willing?
mhm.
That's a change that's hard.
Gosh. That got so real. Do you know Andrew Huberman, the podcast guy? He's like a Stanford medical professor, very
Mm,
popular podcast. Anyway, he was talking to David Goggins, who is a like ultra marathon runner, and he was a Navy SEAL for a time. Blah blah blah. Anyway, he was saying that there's new medical evidence in the brain, neuroscience research coming out that suggests that if you are doing things that you don't want to do and you keep pushing through those things toward change, toward growth, it gives it this muscle in your brain essentially grows and expands, and you can take on new challenges, and
mm.
you're a more resilient person. But if you don't do things that you don't want to do, so if you take the easy way, that muscle shrinks, and so you're
Oh,
not
wow.
as resilient. So it was like a really fascinating conversation. But yeah, it gets to the heart of what you're saying of being willing to change even when you don't want to, because it actually there is like medical research now suggesting that that makes you a better person, more willing to change.
Well, it's interesting. You kinda think of, like, taking a leap of faith or a step of faith, and if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like your behavior leads the capacity, leads the growth and capability and capacity. Which is really
Exactly.
interesting because that sometimes that first behavior is often when we're the most afraid, right? It's like, I don't
Mhm,
really wanna do this," or even though I know I feel like I'm being called to do it, I feel led to do it, I know that I need to do it for my sake, my family's sake, for whoever, you're responsible for's sake, but, it's gonna be uncomfortable and I don't wanna do it,
mhm,
and then you just go do it. And then I think in my experience, I think most people, um would agree that what you just said is very true. You said you can back it up with scientific data. I
mhm,
think experiential there's a lot of, just through experience, you can tell that that's true as well. once you face your fear, once you're willing to take that, to take a step in faith, um, all of a sudden you look around and you're like, "All right, okay, we're here, we're alive, we're further than we were," and all of a sudden you start to think a little bit differently. Your confidence grows. Okay, if I can do that, then what's next? Now I feel more able to do, the next thing, or just to do more of what you just did. Um,
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
this podcast is
any
a good
parent
example
could
of
say
that.
that. Oh, yeah? How's that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is not something that I was, necessarily looking forward to, but, you brought the idea, and I was thinking about it, prayed about it, and I was like, "Okay." I mean, I don't know if that it's, how it's gonna go, what it's gonna look like, but I did feel something that says like, "Hey, this is the type of change we're talking about. This is taking a step out of your comfort zone and doing something different and just seeing and just putting the anxiety or the fears aside and just saying, 'Hey, just go for it and just see.'" And
I
then,
love that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but it is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but as we get
Cool.
into it, it is fun and, I think the conversations are good. Hopefully, it's encouraging to somebody, but yeah, that's just one example, right? We have examples of this all the time in all our lives, especially I interrupted you, but I'll let you continue your thought. What were you gonna say about parenting?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just gonna say that being a parent, I think, would teach you that. I mean, anybody that's got a small child, baby, 1-year-old. I got a 1-year-old, and that changes your capacity so much. Just doing new things you never thought you would be doing. But here we are, and you're stronger for it. So,
Yes. Yes.
I want to get your thoughts on. Okay, so that's general growth. I love the way that you approach it and the way you think through it. But how does that apply to the different areas of your life? So let's say as a business owner in real estate, and you're looking at the market, you're looking at deals, you're looking at difficulties within the real estate market right now. How do you
Mhm.
think about growth and change and improving yourself? Within this difficult time that you're experiencing right now.
Humility and flexibility. I
Mm,
think which is really difficult sometimes because you also need conviction behind your vision.
mm,
So that can be a really challenging, uh, thing to work through because, you've before anybody starts out on a business venture, you've got a vision, you've got a mission, you've got a plan, and then what happens when circumstances outside of your control, come into play? And then everything that you thought, everything that you envisioned for so long all of a sudden seems like, well, uh, we still believe we can do this. We have what it takes. We've got the skills, we've got the resources, but there's this big, you know, overarching factor that we have no control over that is really standing in the way of us, moving in that direction at the speed we'd like to do. So what do you do? Do you just sit there and wait? In most cases, if you have overhead, then that's not an option.
mm,
Um, or do you, go back to what we talked about before? Uh, do you get humble? Do you get flexible? Do you give it away? I think that's a big part of it. Do you give it away? At that point, you realize like, hey, who am I doing this for? What purpose is there
I
here?
see.
Whose vision is it? And I think when you have that perspective, you also can realize that, hey, you don't want to hold on to anything too tightly, because some things are just meant to get you going. When I'm talking about visions, some things are meant to sustain for a long time, um, and you've got to be willing to that. You got to be humble enough to realize you don't know the answer to those questions. We can get called into
Mm,
certain things, and it's really exciting. And in our thought, in our brain, like, okay, we had a little success here, and now you're planning the next 25 years, and it's kind of rinse and repeat type thing, and you're going to grow this little success into a repeatable process, and it's going to blow up, and it's going to be great. And in a lot of times that's true. Depending on what kind of business you're in and what you're doing. Other times, you're going to run into difficulty, and you're going to have to sit down and have a real, uh,
mm,
you know, have some time to really reflect and think and determine. Okay, maybe it's not. Maybe the vision isn't exactly what I thought it was, and then the humility to say, "Well, it's not mine anyways." So
mm,
for me, what that looks like is, okay, God, I believed you called us into this, and all of a sudden we're going up against some difficult things that we have no control over. We're not able to break through. We're just kind of sitting here waiting. What do we do? What do we do? This isn't mine. If I believe this is we're following you here. What do you want us to do? Um, and then in hearing, the answer to that, you can, You get peace in your heart about a direction, and also, surround yourself uh, with people you trust that, that can give you some good advice. And it goes back to also what we talked about at the beginning. What's your intake? What are you listening to? What are you watching? Who's speaking into you? Those things. And oftentimes I think that if you've got the right things there, then that answer when you're asking that question will come. Okay, how can we pivot? What can we do that maybe has a similar, same industry? Probably, yeah. I don't know. I'm not going to put limits on anything, but I think often though it's still within your skill set, right? Still within your experience. Like for us, for instance, we've had a very it's all it's been an interesting journey, but it's all been in residential. We started flipping houses, then we started developing townhomes and condos. Then we started, buying apartments, doing multifamily syndications, and along the way, I got my broker's license. So it's all in that residential space, residential real estate. But it's all been a little bit different, and now we're pursuing the private lending side of the business. Why are we pursuing private lending? Because we had to look around in the multifamily. Was like, yeah, we like multifamily. We feel like we've got a good team here, a good process, but the market is not making it to where we can really grow. Like the opportunities just aren't there right now. It's cyclical; it'll come back. Um, but do we sit and wait? Do we sit and wait it out? Well, like I said, we've got a team, we've got overhead. That's not a good option for us, to sit and wait. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna see that, hey, where are we competent? Where do we have experience? What can we add on to what we're already doing that makes us stronger, more diverse, that allows us to better weather, um, you know, the different cycles. So if multifamily is um, not moving at the pace that we'd like, well, that doesn't mean that we have to be still. That means if we have these other things turned on, then we can kind of just move focus a little bit into whatever is working, whatever is moving a little bit more smoothly at that time, and just allow you to be more diverse. And then it doesn't go against the original vision. It really enhances it. It makes it more rich. It gives you more solvency because you're able to weather difficult times in a better way, in a more diverse way, um, much more capable way. Um, but yeah, it goes back to I think it goes back to having that question. Um, okay, let's reflect. Let's look at where we are. Um, what can we do? What do we need to do? And then getting peace about the direction and going for it, taking that step of faith.
Yeah, so about that process, what you're saying makes me think like, okay, so how do you do kind of like a risk assessment or a growth assessment, if you want to call it that? Like, how do you know what you're failing out or what your options
Mm.
aren't or are? And then how do you know like which direction to go? Like, okay, I need to grow in this area, and then you go do it. Like, how do you even make that initial assessment for yourself, whether personally or professionally?
I mean, you've got your traditional metrics, right? I mean, your business metrics. I don't think we need to get into those
Okay.
too much, but we can. I mean, right? Everyone has revenue targets, income goals, and then you certainly build activity goals,
Mhm.
production goals around those to make sure you're doing the right things and that the things that you're doing are successful. Um, but beyond that, I think you also need to look at, morale within your culture,
Mm,
and this is a little bit different, I guess, so 'cause, sometimes you gotta change out of necessity.
mm,
Um, Sometimes you feel led to change. So those are, I think, 2 different things, but both require humility, both require, your willingness to be flexible,
mhm,
to not hold on to anything too tight. Um, but for me, and I think there's a lot about finding joy in what you do, finding
mm,
peace in what you do. Um, and I don't believe that that's necessarily, uh, you don't find joy and peace in maybe the specific task or the specific industry. I think you find joy and peace in what you're doing if you're living with purpose and you're able to use your God-given, strengths and skills. That's, I think, being used in the way you're designed to be used, and there's a real, satisfaction and peace and joy, that comes in that. So if you're not feeling those things, um, yeah, then maybe some change does need to happen, but maybe the change isn't, "I need to go find a new job. I need to go find a new industry." Maybe the change is, "I need to know who I am, how I was created,
Mm,
and then wherever God has placed me in this moment, I need to figure out ways to use those talents and strengths." And all of a sudden, that looks a little bit different. I was talking to a guy who was hating his job, um, and he said, and he blamed the job. But then
mm,
what he realized, and when he really evaluated himself, he's like, "You know what? And this was a sales position. He says, "I love to teach." Well, then as he got further into that job, he started to when he's talking to his clients, he was educating them. He was teaching them
mm,
about, the different, aspects of the product. And then what he realized is it wasn't the job that he disliked so much. What he wasn't finding satisfaction because he wasn't able to be who he was created to be. When he started to do those things, when he started to realize who I am, and then he started to put those things into practice, all of a sudden it wasn't about what you were selling. It's not about the product, necessarily. It's about who you are and how you're using your God-given gifts and talents and purpose. And I'm telling you, your purpose is always gonna be about other people. So how are you using those things to positively impact other people?
mm.
And all of a sudden, things become a lot more clear. All of a sudden you start to find that joy and peace. Um, but you gotta change, right, to get there. And, but you gotta know how to change. Which we're getting into a little bit.
Man, this
Getting
this
into a
is
little
hitting
bit
me like
deeper
a
there.
ton of bricks, man. This is great. This is great. This is great. How do you I have to ask, maybe this will be the last segment of the episode here, is okay, so you talked about growing and kind of changing as far as a business. So you're looking at the landscape, things are challenging, moving into the private lending space for some of the reasons you discussed. How about personally? What are some ways that you're looking to
Mm,
grow this year in 2024? What are some things that you don't have to get too deep or vulnerable in this episode, but just, some one of the things that as you kind of reflect and things that you'd like to do better this year and improve, like, yeah, how do you assess that? And then how are you trying to improve in those areas?
yeah, yeah, a big one for me is time management. I've got 3 little
Mm,
kids, who I
mm,
adore, love spending time with. But those of you, everyone out there who's got young children or has had them knows that it can be a challenging time, to with work and family and, um, you know, fulfilling your duties and obligations in the different roles. Um, But getting just having more of a plan around that, is a big one for us in our home. Um, so time management, making sure that I'm finding enough time too um, to just do, like, some practical things. Make sure you're exercising regularly, you're eating well. I think that plays such a big role in your stress levels and, just, whether you're like, and I'm not talking about just, like, happy, like, fake happy. I'm talking about just, like, you're more calm and you just feel better
mhm,
about yourself. It's just a general better well-being. A big one, and uh, those are kinda 2 practical things, time management and just making sure I'm taking care of myself and, uh, but the 3rd one I think is when we've hit on this, in episode 1, but it's trust.
mm,
It's, where am I trusting God and where am I not? And if
mm,
I'm having anxiety and stress in an area, um, what's the reason for that? I mean, in most cases, probably in all cases, it's because I'm not trusting God in that area, and
mm.
I'm trying to control too much. I'm trying to control things
Yeesh.
they're really outside of my control. So really, and how do you change in that area? I think it's just being aware. I don't know, some of these things, we just said, God, we need your help. God, we need your help. Need your help. I wanna trust you. I wanna rely on you. I need more faith. God, give me more faith. Um, but, just practically, it's just being aware. Just being aware and, taking your thoughts captive. That's a big one. We can't
Mm,
control what pops into our head. You cannot. Like, you can try. Like I tell you, don't think about something, you're gonna think about it. But what we can control is whether or not we allow those thoughts to linger, and then do we let them go down the rabbit holes, or do we stand up and we take that thought captive, and we say no. We develop our no. That's a good change for me. Develop your no. To have a purposeful no.
mm,
That gosh, we can get into all kinds of stuff there, and you can get into people pleasing, all kinds of things as far as
mhm,
when to say
mhm,
no and how to say no. But I
mhm.
think it's really important too. Um, and your thoughts. That's a big one for me because, like we said about the beginning, how you think will determine your life. The way you perceive things, the way you think about things, whether you're afraid or you're confident, it stems from what you believe. And then, your thoughts, and then your thoughts come next. So check your beliefs and then check your thoughts. And in doing so, uh, you can change the course of your life. Um, but again, sort of taking it all the way back to the beginning because I know we're almost done here. What are you taking in? Who are you listening to? That's going to determine what you believe and ultimately what you think.
Man, I get so fired up listening to you because you are like preaching right at me. Just all the things you're saying, like so much. I was just talking to my wife this weekend about making more presents for her because
Mm.
my time management has been very poor lately. I'm not taking care of myself.
Hey,
I'm
me
not a
too, man.
calm,
It's
peaceful, like
Yep,
that is
yep.
just so real. So um, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your discovery and then sharing all these things because I need to hear it if nobody else.
Well, I say these things not because I'm good at them. I say it because this is
Yeah.
just what God's showing me and
Mm,
areas that I need to improve. And I think, like you're saying, I think a lot of people in our stage of life and not just our I mean, everybody, this is stuff that we're all people, we're all
yeah.
dealing with similar things. So, yeah, when I say these things, it's not because I feel like, I've really got this handled or under control. It's things that I'm working on too.
Amen. Amen. We are all working on them together. But along in that journey, I am just appreciative of your vulnerability and just sharing and your wisdom. You're years ahead of me and years ahead of a lot of our listeners. So just appreciate your giving back to us in that way.
If it's helpful, yeah, yeah. I just hope it's helpful. Ultimately, I hope it can be encouraging. If not, and just that, hey, no one's out there on an island. Nobody's alone. So
Yeah.
we all deal with we all deal with change. We all deal with difficulty in time management. These are things that um, that just that we're all going through. That we all got to figure out. And but we can't like want to emphasize too that we shouldn't do it alone, right?
Mm,
For me, it means seeking Jesus first, and it means surrounding myself with people that I know love me, will encourage me, and will hold me accountable too.
mm.
To take those steps of faith, to be willing to change, to stay humble, to be flexible, not grip anything too tight.
Amen. Amen. That's a good word. Josh, thank you. Episode 3 on growth. That is a wrap. We will see you next time and get some more wisdom from Josh Alexander. Thanks again, man.
All right, thanks, Brandon.